I mean, domestic terrorism now was top order. And there was a massive amount of investigation and arrests throughout the United States.
How clean my office is.
By the mid-'80s, the federal agencies had the lesson of the order. So they knew some of the folks that had come out of the Aryan nations were doing bad things. They were committing crimes. They were killing people. So the feds were interested in who's there and what are they doing and what are they planning on doing next.
Randy Weaver was a person with white separatist beliefs who moved his family from Iowa to Boundary County, Idaho, to the place called Ruby Ridge.
They were 50 miles or so from the Canadian border. They had no electricity, no running water, no indoor plumbing. We're talking about a cabin made by Randy Weaver and his wife on a mountaintop. These are people that want to be left alone.
The Weavers were deeply religious, and they wanted to live in a style they believed was Old Testament Christian. They were really imagining this fortress, this place where they could really separate themselves from a corrupt and dangerous world.
I don't know that Randy Weaver knew at the time that they moved to Ruby Ridge that they would be so close to the Aryan Nations compound, which was just 60 miles south. But they started showing up. First, it's purely social. They attended family picnics, those kinds of things. But as Randy began to interact more with them, he bought into the message, the anti-government message.
The movement is growing all over the world. Good men are coming forth. Men with iron wills who are determined that their race is not going to die and become extinct.
By the time Randy Weaver started showing up at the Aryan Nations, it was just after the whole Matthews episode. And unfortunately for Randy Weaver, the feds were listening.
They had lots of events there designed to potentially recruit hardcore folks into the compound. And it was at one of those meetings that Randy Weaver was spotted by an undercover federal informant.
This guy got next to Randy Weaver and learned that he was, clearly a racist, that he wanted to live his white separatist lifestyle in North Idaho, but that he was having trouble putting two nickels together, and that he was interested in some income. And one thing led to another, and pretty soon Randy Weaver agrees to saw some shotguns.
In my opinion, the ATF pretty much entrapped him into making these shotguns illegal by cutting off too much of the barrel, and then comes out and wants to arrest him over it.
They figured if we can arrest this guy on federal firearms charges, maybe he can lead us to other people that are doing more dastardly things. They did think Randy Weaver could be flipped.
So they asked him to be an informant, which he immediately refused. Randy Weaver didn't trust the government and was absolutely not interested in being an informant. However, he failed to appear for his next court appearance.
Once you don't show up for trial, the case is assigned to the U.S. Marshals Service. And the U.S. Marshals Service doesn't know whether or not Randy Weaver was entrapped or how those shotguns came about. They just know they have a fugitive.
The marshals brought in their special surveillance team, and they kind of skunked around the property.
This just got complicated. Someone's standing in the way of this pickup, and that someone's got to disappear. Go to the GPS point and take out the target.
What they decided to do was to have motion-activated cameras placed near the Weaver cabin. The tape showed that Randy Weaver was there with his wife and his children and a man named Kevin Harris, and that they frequently were armed. They have been shaking their heads. What are we going to do? We go up there, and he's going to shoot at us, and we're going to shoot back.
On the day of the shooting, the marshals had a 6-man team. They divided into 2 elements, and one element of 3 went up on the mountain to have a visual on the cabin itself. The other element was on the ground closer to the cabin when the Weaver's dog caught the scent of the marshals and went after them. All we know at that point was there was a shootout.
Who shot who first is still subject to, interpretation. But when it was all said and done, 14-year-old Sammy Weaver's dead, the dog's dead, and so is Federal Marshal William Dean, killed on the property of the white separatists. The FBI had every reason to think when they're dealing with Randy Weaver, they could be dealing with another Bob Matthews.
Because they believe that they are deploying into a firefight with a group of armed separatists, very much like the Order. The rationale is given that a surrender warning doesn't need to be called out, that warning has already been given, so agents can open fire as soon as they see any armed adult. Well, the Weavers are always armed.
I got there, and there were trucks and jeeps and all kinds of vehicles, even armored personnel carriers. It was just overwhelming how much was happening and how many people were involved.
Where we were at the roadblock, it was out of view where this base operation was occurring. But there were, an assortment of law enforcement people going across this little bridge.
Getting up there for, boy.
Neighbors, friends of Randy Weaver, and reporters from all over the country started gathering, trying to get information. We were down a good 2 miles or so from where the actual cabin was. So we had no clue as to what the FBI had in mind.
As morning dawns on Ruby Ridge, a team of 10 FBI agents surround the cabin. These are snipers who've been trained to hit a dime from 200 meters. Randy Weaver, Kevin Harris, and Sarah Weaver decide they're going to go out and check on Sam Weaver's body. They make their way out with their weapons to the shed where Samuel has been taken by the family when the shot goes out. Randy is hit in the shoulder. They run back to the house and another shot rings out. This shot goes through the door, hits Vicki Weaver in the face, splinters and wounds Kevin Harris, and drops Vicki dead to the floor.
When word came down that Sammy and Vicki Weaver were dead, the crowd at the roadblock, which numbered 50 to 100 to 200 on occasion, went crazy.
You call yourself an American? These are Americans. These are God-fearing people. You don't even know your Constitution. Go back and read what your founding fathers said.
The events at Ruby Ridge lit up the radical right. Here was a government that would murder men, women, and children in order to pursue whatever their ends were.
Baby killer! Baby killer! Baby killer!
The roadblock became a gathering point for skinheads, for Aryan Nations members, for all kinds of people, furiously shaking their fists at the Zionist-occupied government.
You're a disgrace to the white race! Disgrace to the race!
This was the first time the movement had gathered in such a fashion, this publicly. It became a political event of its own. These were people who saw themselves in Randy Weaver.
You look at what happened and how many times it could have been averted and avoided. The idea that the far right had at that moment that the government was a very dangerous entity, this case would seem to prove it as completely as possible.
Ruby Ridge, more even than Robert Matthews in the order, became a central calling card and rallying card for the far right. For them, the government was after Weaver's guns and his religion. And guns and religion became the twin pillars of the white supremacist movement.
In late summer 1992, after Ruby Ridge, several members of the extremist movement saw that as an opportune moment to sort of gather everybody together and let's raise hell about this.
One race, one vote, one nation, one people, one homeland. We're going to heaven.
Louis Bean, former Grand Dragon of the Ku Klux Klan, said now is the time for you as an individual to commit overt acts of anti-government violence. Essentially, anybody representative of government or law enforcement was a fair and reasonable target.
The government is an enemy of the people. And in this war, it's an all or nothing. You know, we're either going to win as the white race, or we're going to lose.
Probably about 10 o'clock in the morning, I got a call at the hospital. There's a lady who's trapped, and the only way that we're going to be able to extricate her and save her life is to amputate her leg. So I got an amputation set. I got some nylon rope. Away I went. When I got to the building, it was surreal. There were a lot of first responders there who had pretty well set things up. So they could take somebody away the minute that they found them. And then I was led into the basement.
We could hear people screaming. We could hear them screaming, we could hear them crying. You just couldn't see them because it's so dark. When they fired up these lights, you could see the floors had fallen on top of each other and created like a dungeon underneath the Murrah building. Everywhere you looked in this floor that you could see, there were these round circles of coagulated blood that were coming through the cracks of the floor. These circles were 3 and 4 feet in diameter, and they were everywhere. It seemed like everywhere. And you knew that that was a person that had been crushed.
They led me to where Dana was trapped. There was the first responder with his hand on the beam that had her leg trapped. And if it trembled or moved, we were told we had to go. The beam was lying on her leg, her tibia, just below the knee. Basically, to do the amputation, I had to lie with my legs up by her head. And so I took the traction rope and tightened it down so that I had a tourniquet. And then, you know, it's kind of like diving into ice water. I had to start.
Just as I got up to where the barricade was, this incredible scare went through the crowd. Someone was yelling they thought they had discovered a second bomb. Get back, get back.
They're going to hot get them back.
They start screaming at us. Get out of this building. We have just found another device. And, of course, everybody's heart sinks because we got people still alive in here.
I was on the 8th floor. My eyes were in pretty bad shape. 2 of my friends worked their way over to me and said, "We've got to get out of here." I was praying and I was saying, "Lord, don't let there be any more bombs."
It turns out that it was not a real device. It had been a mock-up for one of the agencies there. But we were still telling people, you know, that we couldn't guarantee their safety as they went in there. I remember seeing that team down there working on that girl to amputate that leg. Everybody screaming out, "Get out of there, get out of there, the bomb's coming," and they would not leave. They would not leave her.
I don't remember how many times I thought I had completed the amputation. We would try to extract Dana, and she was still caught. I reached a point where all of the blades were broken and there was nothing else to do. But I had in my pocket a pocket knife that I keep very sharp. The thing that was keeping us from extracting her was the quadriceps tendon, and once I cut through that, then I could kind of get a sense that the leg was free, and we were able to extract her.
When I got out of the building, I sat on the curb waiting for an ambulance. I couldn't see anything, but I could hear people yelling, people screaming, sirens in the background. And I thought, what crazy person did this? Who has come in here and done this terrible thing?
The bombing in Oklahoma City was an attack on innocent children and defenseless citizens. It was an act of cowardice, and it was evil. Let there be no room for doubt. We will find the people who did this.
Oh, fuck y'all. Y'all did this shit.
The bombing of the Murrah building was the largest domestic terrorist event that had ever occurred in the United States. We probably had close to 500 investigators.
Man, what y'all did to the slaves was terrorism.
We had forensic teams, bomb squad teams, evidence response teams, all kinds of experts looking for clues.
This becomes one of the biggest criminal investigations in American history. Every police agency in the country is in some way trying to track down leads. Because at the very first,
that's why I say we
had no idea.
Taught to be stupid people. I say it again, stupid.
We have had hundreds, if not thousands, of leads. Each one of those is treated very seriously. But at this point, we cannot speculate with regard to who is responsible. We ended up with leads in literally every state as well as many foreign countries. Whenever you have a mass catastrophe such as the Murrah bombing, the assumption is always you've got to have this great conspiracy. There's got to be multiple people involved. And we operated under that assumption as well. We were getting calls, even just after the bombing happened. We were getting reports by the thousands. I saw this, I saw that. Then we started getting calls over the radio about Middle Easterners. Start looking for Middle Easterners.
There has yet been no claim of responsibility for this bombing. Although if you talk to intelligence sources and to law enforcement officials, they all say in their early guess in this situation is that this particular bombing probably has roots in the Middle East.
A U.S. government source has told CBS News that it has Middle East terrorism written all over it.
I started making phone calls, trying to find out what was going on, and very quickly found out the feds went and raided an apartment in Dallas that was occupied by some Middle Eastern guys. But then someone I spoke to said, "Do you know what day it is?" It's, you know, what? I'd been off work for a couple of days. And so, you know, wasn't paying attention to the calendar that closely, and someone said, "It's
I ain't how you go out there killing nobody, man."
Immediately it hit me.
Fire.
This is about Waco. You know, this is about Waco.
The Branch Davidians had been in Texas for over 50 years by the time that most people outside of Waco had ever heard of them. They were an offshoot of the Seventh-day Adventist Church. They found a place just outside of Waco, called it Mount Carmel, and set up this community. In the late 80s, a young Davidian named Vernon Howell had a revelation that God had chosen him to be their leader. He changed his name to David Koresh and began preaching his vision of Armageddon out of the book of Revelation.
Well, how's God going to talk to me latter days? Who's going to bring that book? So there'll be no excuse.
In about May of 1992, the Sheriff's Department in Waco got a report from a UPS truck driver about a shipment under Mount Carmel. There was a box that fell apart, and some pineapple grenade hulls came out of the box. That's what prompted the beginning of the ATF investigation.
That investigation was able to determine that they were illegally converting automatic weapons in there. That they had purchased about $43,000 worth of firearms during the year prior to it. And members of the community out there heard automatic weapons fire and explosions coming from the compound.
Koresh preached increasingly that they were going to be met with an opposing force.
So when we start getting into the subject of the 7 seals, it looks like somebody's going to get a butt whooping in the near future, aren't they?
He believed that the government was going to try to invade this sacred ground that was Mount Carmel. And so this actually would be where Armageddon takes place.
People in ATF felt that if this Armageddon that he predicted didn't come true, he was going to have to do something to prompt it. So we decided that we needed to act as quickly as possible.
Reporters for the Waco Tribune-Herald had really good sources in local law enforcement, and they had been tipped about when the raid was going to go down. The morning of the raid, a reporter is sent to the compound, and he's driving around trying to figure out where he is. And when here comes a Buick station wagon, stops, rolls down the window, and says, "Hey, buddy, are you lost?" He says, "Yeah, I'm looking for Mount Carmel. There's going to be a big raid." Turns out that the guy in the car is one of the inner circle of Koresh's followers. He immediately goes and tells Koresh what was happening.
That morning, David said that we had information that there was going to be a raid today. The men were arming themselves, and the women were told to go back to their room.